Welcome to American National Government. In this course, you will discuss the purpose, structure, and evolution of United States government.
I'm Jordan O'Connell, History and Government Instructor at Northeast Iowa Community College. This lecture distills a decade of my written notes taken from American Government, Roots and Reform, American Government by Lenz and Holman, and our course-assigned OpenStax American Government textbook. This lecture focuses on political socialization and public opinion as data. The core question is this: who teaches citizens what politics means when families, schools, churches, media feeds, and peer groups all transmit different stories about authority and belonging? The core competency is to describe the role that political socialization plays in American life.
Who teaches citizens what politics means when families, schools, churches, media feeds, and peer groups all transmit different stories about authority and belonging? The struggle moves through families, schools, churches, peer groups, media systems, survey instruments, and campaign files that form citizens before they vote. Before a citizen argues about taxes, courts, policing, immigration, schools, or war, someone has already taught that citizen what government feels like. That teacher may be a parent, a school, a church, a neighborhood, a military unit, a union hall, a sports team, a social media feed, a workplace, or a national crisis. The first lesson may not sound political. It may sound like a family warning about trusting officials. It may sound like a school pledge, a pastor explaining duty, a coach explaining discipline, a grandparent explaining sacrifice, or a phone screen rewarding anger. Political socialization names that formation. The civic problem is uncomfortable because Americans like to imagine political belief as private choice. We tell ourselves that we weigh evidence, compare arguments, and select principles like careful judges. Some people do more of that than others, but no one begins from nowhere. Citizens inherit stories, fears, loyalties, and assumptions before they develop full political vocabulary. They absorb judgments about which institutions deserve trust, which groups deserve suspicion, which claims sound normal, and which conflicts feel threatening. Political socialization is the process by which people acquire political beliefs, values, habits, and identities. It does not mean brainwashing. It does not mean citizens lack responsibility. It means political judgment forms inside relationships and institutions. Public opinion then takes those formed judgments and turns them into something government can count, quote, and respond to. That second step changes the politics. Once pollsters measure opinion, citizens become not only speakers but data points. Campaigns, parties, interest groups, journalists, and office holders can then use those numbers to claim momentum, justify action, avoid risk, or pressure opponents. Socialization and polling belong together because one explains how citizens become political while the other explains how institutions measure that formation and feed it back into the political machine. The hard question is not whether public opinion shapes government. Of course it does in a republic. The harder question is who forms it, who measures it, who interprets it, and who benefits when a messy public becomes a clean percentage. The American constitutional system assumes consent of the governed, but consent has to be produced in daily life before it appears at the ballot box. A child does not start with Article 1, and Article 3. A child starts with authority. Parents make rules, schools enforce schedules, churches teach duty or conscience. Police officers, social workers, coaches, judges, soldiers, doctors, employers, and neighbors all offer lessons about whether authority protects, ignores, humiliates, or helps. Those lessons become political expectations before they become political opinions. Alexis de Tocqueville noticed this formation problem in democracy in America. He studied not only elections but habits. Americans formed associations, attended local meetings, built churches, served on juries, and practiced cooperation outside formal national government. Tocqueville saw that democracy required more than voting. It required habits that taught citizens how to act together without waiting for a king, a bureaucrat, or a noble to direct them. The point was not that every association was noble. The point was that citizens learned citizenship by doing ordinary institutional work. Modern political socialization still works through institutions, but the list has grown. Families transmit party identification, religious language, racial memory, class expectations, patriotism, suspicion, and civic confidence. Schools transmit public memory through curriculum, rituals, discipline policies, school rules, and the authority structure of the building itself. Peer groups mark what can be said without social punishment. Religious communities teach moral priorities and forms of public duty. Media systems teach what deserves attention. Online platforms signal which emotional responses receive visibility. Socialization does not create permanent partisan robots. People revise beliefs. People rebel against families. People leave churches, change parties, join movements, serve in the military, attend college, lose jobs, survive illness, encounter courts, start businesses, marry into different communities, or watch agencies fail. Major events can re-socialize adults. A terrorist attack can change views on security. A financial crash can change views on regulation. A pandemic can change views on federalism, public health, expertise, and trust. A police killing broadcast on video can change views on state power. A war can change views on executive authority. The alternative to studying socialization is pretending citizens arrive in politics as isolated, rational calculators. That fiction makes government easier to diagram and easier to misunderstand. If citizens used only policy charts, campaigns would look different. If voters all held stable issue hierarchies, parties would not invest so much in identity, fear, belonging, and trust. Campaigns know socialization exists. They test messages by region, race, age, education, religion, class, gender, and media habit because they know citizens hear the same words through different formation histories. Long before polling firms reduced the public to samples and percentages, Americans were being formed by family authority, church discipline, school ritual, workplace hierarchy, military service, and neighborhood reputation. George Gallup built a national polling business in the 1930s by claiming representative samples could outperform crude straw polls such as the Literary Digest disaster of 1936. That promise rested on a larger institutional order. Mass public schools standardized civic ritual through calendars, textbooks, flag ceremonies, and attendance rules. Churches tied moral vocabulary to partisan instincts through sermons, denominational networks, and local leadership. Radio networks and later television built common national reference points by selecting which crises, presidents, wars, strikes, and protests entered living rooms at scale. By the middle of the 20th century, campaigns no longer guessed only from rallies and editorials. They hired survey researchers, cross-tabulated by race, income, region, religion, union membership, and gender, and tested issue wording to discover how citizens heard the same proposal through different formation histories. The first actor under pressure is the family. Family influence does not operate only through explicit party instruction. Many households rarely discuss policy, but teach politics through posture. A parent who treats government benefits as shameful teaches one civic lesson. A parent who treats a union card as family protection teaches another. A veteran who describes military service as duty forms one kind of citizen. A family that experienced redlining, deportation fear, police harassment, eminent domain, farm foreclosure, or public assistance carries state power in memory. Children absorb those stories before they can test them against textbooks. Schools face a different pressure. They must teach civic belonging while also handling conflict over what the nation means. Curriculum committees, state standards, school boards, textbook publishers, teachers, parents, and legislators all fight over public memory. A civics lesson can teach constitutional ideals, but a school discipline system can demonstrate how authority sorts people. A school may celebrate equality while tracking young people into unequal opportunity. It may teach free speech while punishing disorder. It may ask children to honor the flag while some families connect that flag to sacrifice and others connect it to exclusion. Schools are not neutral pipes delivering facts. They are public institutions that model authority. Religious communities also shape political identity. They can teach charity, discipline, moral limits on state power, duties to the poor, protection of unborn life, racial reconciliation, religious liberty, national chosenness, pacifism, or public confrontation. A church, synagogue, mosque, temple, or other faith community can turn private belief into public action through sermons, service networks, voter drives, litigation, mutual aid, or protest. The civic effect depends on both the teaching and the institutional behavior. A religious community can build social trust. It can also train members to treat outsiders as threats. Media and peers now carry socialization into daily repetition. A citizen may receive political cues before breakfast through notifications, podcasts, group chats, short videos, memes, and algorithmic recommendations. The platform ranks, rewards, repeats, and monetizes attention. A claim that produces outrage can travel faster than a correction because outrage keeps people engaged. In this sense, socialization has an infrastructure: servers, recommendation systems, ad markets, influencer networks, audience metrics, and moderation rules. Pollsters enter after those influences have done much of their work. Their pressure is technical and political. They must turn a large public into a sample. They decide whom to contact, how to weight responses, how to phrase questions, how to order choices, how to report uncertainty, and how to interpret non-response. Sampling sounds dry until a bad sample misrepresents the public. Question wording can change results. Asking whether government should provide assistance to the poor may produce a different response than asking whether welfare spending should increase. Asking about safety, freedom, parental rights, public health, or equality can frame the same policy through different socialized instincts. Margin of error deserves plain treatment. It is not a magic shield against bad polling. It describes expected sampling uncertainty under the poll's assumptions. It does not automatically solve non-response bias, bad wording, turnout error, or timing problems. If a poll says candidate A leads candidate B by 2 points with a margin of error of 3 points, the result signals uncertainty, not certainty disguised as math. Political actors know this. Campaigns may trumpet favorable polls, dismiss unfavorable ones, fund internal polls, or use polling to shape donor behavior. A poll can measure opinion, but it can also become an event that changes opinion. Salience and efficacy complete the machinery. Salience means an issue is salient enough for a citizen to notice and act on it. A voter may hold many opinions, but only a few drive behavior. Political efficacy means a person believes participation can carry force. A citizen with low efficacy may agree with a position and still stay home, avoid meetings, or disengage from public argument. Socialization can raise or crush efficacy. A neighborhood that watches officials respond to community pressure absorbs one lesson about participation. A neighborhood that watches leaders ignore repeated pleas absorbs another lesson about politics and money. Tocqueville wrote under the pressure of explaining why democratic society in the United States did not collapse into isolation or permanent disorder. His attention to associations was not decorative sociology. It was an institutional answer. He described citizens forming groups, founding churches, building schools, serving on juries, and creating committees, because those bodies trained people to cooperate before the national state acted. In that argument, association is a civic workshop. The tension is that association can train democratic competence or social conformity. A family can teach courage or prejudice. A school can teach constitutional discipline or bureaucratic obedience. A church can teach service or domination. A peer network can support civic competence or punish dissent. A platform can connect citizens or train them to confuse reaction with judgment. Tocqueville identifies the formation space, but he does not spare anyone the burden of judging what that space produces. Public opinion adds a second tension. Democratic government should listen to the people, yet the people do not appear as one clean voice. Polling constructs a measured public from sampling, categories, question wording, timing, and interpretation. When a headline says Americans support a policy, the real issue is which Americans were contacted, how they were contacted, what they were asked, during which week, and with what choices available. That is not cynicism. That is the minimum audit required before a percentage becomes a public command. This carries force because officials use public opinion strategically. A legislator may say the public demands action when a poll favors action. The same legislator may say leadership requires ignoring polls when public opinion runs the other way. Presidents cite approval ratings when strong and blame media narratives when weak. Interest groups commission polls to show support for their policy. Journalists use polls to build stories about momentum. Campaigns use polls to decide where to spend money. The public becomes an input, a weapon, and sometimes a costume. Public opinion is real, but it is not self-explanatory. It has to be formed, measured, translated, and used. Each step creates opportunities for distortion and responsibility. A citizen who wants democratic government has to move beyond shouting, listen to the people. The next questions must be which people, measured by whom, through what method, about what choice, and with what consequence. The source tension ends with a responsibility problem. If political socialization shapes us, we still must examine what shaped us. If polls measure us, we still must ask whether the measurement deserves trust. If institutions form citizens, citizens must decide when to preserve those institutions and when to challenge them. Democracy does not require citizens without influence. It requires citizens honest enough to know influence when they see it, including in themselves. Public opinion is not a spontaneous national mood. It has a supply chain. Families provide stories. Schools provide public memory. Religious communities provide moral vocabulary. Peers provide belonging and punishment. Media systems provide attention. Major events provide shock. Pollsters provide measurement. Campaigns provide interpretation. Officials provide policy response or strategic avoidance. At every point, someone makes choices. This does not mean citizens lack agency. It means agency begins with self-audit. A serious citizen can ask where a belief came from, whether the belief survived contact with evidence, whether the belief serves a group identity more than a public reason, and whether a different community might hear the same issue through a different formation, history. That kind of self-audit does not make politics soft. It makes politics less childish. The sharper comparison is between mechanisms of socialization. Family may be strongest because it starts early. School may be strongest because it uses public authority. Media may be strongest because it repeats messages daily. Religion may be strongest because it attaches politics to moral obligation. Peer groups may be strongest because social punishment changes behavior fast. The decisive test is mechanism rather than mood. The unresolved judgment is direct. If citizens are formed by institutions before they choose, how much responsibility do they bear for examining that formation? A democracy cannot work if everyone treats inherited belief as destiny. It also cannot work if elites dismiss ordinary citizens as programmable data. The harder civic position sits between those evasions. Citizens are shaped, measured, and targeted. They are also responsible for what they do once they know that. The unresolved question is whether public opinion can govern responsibly when formation, measurement, and translation are all vulnerable to distortion.
If you're curious how I'm using AI to build these lectures and reshape higher education, visit thelibertytolearn.com. I'll see you in class.